WNST to put my feet up this Sunday. I'm going to watch Red Zone. I got the Terps in Michigan. I got basketball season beginning here. I'm going to catch up on some Capitals viewing as well as some business and Thanksgiving strategies around here. But baseball will not be keeping me up any longer other than the notion that the Baltimore Orioles are either going to completely wreck this thing in the offseason or figuring out what they're going to do. I'm not holding my breath. But one place where they are still smiling from ear to ear and having parades, and I figure, I got some friends down in Houston. I'm going to reach to some of them this week. She writes about the NFL Texans, and that's a broken-hearted story here on the backside of the Deshaun Watson thing, but they did have a pretty good week in Houston last week. She loves her life there in Houston as all things at the Houston Chronicle, as well as at StradleyLaw.com. We welcome one of our defending champions. She is a lawyer, but she is nice. Steph Stradley joins us live from deep in the heart of Texas, where the hangover is still there from a real live baseball world championship parade. That's good stuff down there. Please tell me how much fun it was.
I mean, it's just really amazing, just given how difficult it was for so many years, because they were trying to stay kind of relevant for a long time, and what was happening is just, they were betting too much on expensive players, but they didn't have anybody in development, and so they had to just blow the whole thing up. And so when you blow the whole thing up, it's pretty brutal for a good while. And so seeing these players that are homegrown players kind of grow up and evolve over time, it's just beautiful to watch. And I was at that insane Game 5. I decided I wanted to go to at least one of the World Series games. I had gone to the earlier games that I got, I was able to get online and get tickets real quick. So I got, face value tickets to that. But World Series, I wasn't as lucky, and I ended up thinking, okay, now do I want to get a ticket, a single ticket near where the pitcher is, or do I want to do it where the Crawford boxes are, which is where a lot of the home runs go in Minute Maid Park? And so I got a single Crawford box ticket, and I was going to hope to get the bats to hit home runs over there.
Well, there was plenty of that going on because the balls were juiced,
I had
right?
no idea. It was insane. I am actually physically bruised from it being a mosh pit in there, because I have never experienced any game like that. I mean, it's the World Series, it's Game 5, they need to win it, and it was just, and then I was in the literally best place to be, participating in that game. I mean, it was fun.
Well, it was fun so right down to the end. I mean, that was 2 o'clock in the morning. I was up watching the one you were at, but Game 7 was a little anticlimactic, and I think you guys liked it that way. And, I'll be talking to Dodgers people and baseball people, but there's nothing like winning.
Yeah, but, as much as it ended up being that way, I mean, the Dodgers got plenty of hits that game. You could have got a crooked number in any one of those innings, and that they, kind of defended their way out of it was a miracle. I mean, the whole discussion the entire time was, look at the Astros bullpen, and they completely had to deal with that in an unconventional way. And, Charlie Morton closed it out, but a lot of those players were not used in those roles during the regular season, but it's the World Series.
Well, I think part of this is anytime you win, and look, I wrote a book on the Ravens winning, and we'll go back to, they completed a 4th and 29 pass that year to win. Yeah. They fired an offensive coordinator and won the Super Bowl 7 weeks later. They were down to their last gasp, and Jacoby Jones caught a ball. Those are the story. That they had to defend 4th and 1 4 times at the goal line after the lights went out in the Super Bowl. I mean, so there are these stories, but then there's the Astros, yeah. And if I'm writing the book of the Astros, the whole notion of the way they got their asses kicked in the Bronx, right? That was literally, and I'm not running the whammy on you because clearly it didn't work. My dear friend Jana Marie Smith is one of the executives with the Dodgers, and I threw a note to her and said, look, if the Yankees are going to be in the World Series, can I buy some tickets? And, I was putting my feelers out trying to go to New York because it was the Ravens were off that weekend. They played on Thursday night against Minnesota.
Yeah.
I thought, well, if I get a chance to go to Yankee Stadium and see Game 3 or Game 4 or Game 5 or 1 or 2 and take my wife up, see the Yankees and the Dodgers. So, I started putting the nail in the coffin. Literally, and that's where the Astros were with their backs up against the wall. And obviously, a Game 7 situation in L.A. was no easy situation for them as well. But the storylines of Verlander and Altuve, he's one of my Venezuelan brothers, and Correa and the young players and Keuchel. And, it was very, very easy to like the Houston Astros from afar. But I'm just thinking for someone like you that's been there forever, I'm having McClain on later this week as well. It really is a wonderful, wonderful thing for your community when you win like that.
Oh, well, especially after all the Hurricane Harvey stuff, because when it was at its grimmest, having any kind of sports outlet to kind of look at and watching, Deshaun Watson do his thing, watching the Astros do their thing. Even the Houston Dynamo are playing really well right now. The Rockets, they're playing like it really has been helpful because there's people in our community that have lost everything, and sometimes you just want something where you can just get away from reality a bit. But this particular playoff run was amazing for the Astros because it reminded me very much like the Houston Rockets championships, where they went through a murderer's row and ended up beating, winning in situations where it was really backs to the wall, and they went through the Red Sox, Yankees, and Dodgers. It's pretty hard to say that they don't deserve it. Game 7, Game 7 is what you want.
Well, it was almost for years and years. Look, I am a little bit of a closet Astros fan, going back to J.R. Richard and Nolan Ryan and those beautiful jerseys that I've always loved all my life. One of the regrets I have about the tour was that I didn't buy one.
Those are literally the best jerseys because when you're flipping channels, you instantly know it's the Astros when it's just hello, we're the Astros. This is what we look like.
Yeah, and we're going to make some noise here in honor of Terry Poole and Jose Cruz and Enos Cabell and all of those other legends.
Sure.
For the Astros, it almost feels like they weren't allowed to win. It's been going on for 50 years. The move of the team from league to league, I had thought here when Angelos had a chance when the Nationals came in, the Orioles had a chance to go to the National League if they wanted to avoid the Yankees and the Red Sox, which would have been bad for their gate, but probably be good for what they were trying to do on the field at the time and probably would be for the next 5 years as the Yankees and Red Sox just sort of reload at this point. But the Astros made that move, all part of that whole we're going to get after the Texas Rangers and there's going to be a rivalry, right?
No, that wasn't the reason. The reason why is Bud Selig made it a condition of the purchase of the team. I got to tell you that there's people in the Houston area that will never forgive Bud Selig for any number of things that he has done over the years, including, the Brewers used to be in the American League. Did the Brewers get pushed over the National League? No, because, of course, he wants to get the gate from the Cubs. He's the one that made the Astros have to open up their roof during the previous World Series for some unknown reason. And then he does this business with putting him in the American League. Fine. They did it. They won the whole thing. But
it's been good for them, though, right? In the end, it's been good for them, even though they hated it.
In the long run, not having the designated hitter has been kind of nice. But, it was pretty brutal. Houston's already had various amounts of their sports history taken from them, including being the only team where the Houston Oilers' whole name and colors and all that were taken away. And the history of Houston. Earl Campbell was never a Tennessee Titan, yet he is part of Tennessee's legacy.
His name's on the roof. I was there Sunday. We played the Titans, so I felt it.
Exactly. So, I guess certain people think it's fine to take Houston's history away and do whatever it wants to. It's like, okay, we just deal with it. But, I mean, we don't have to be happy with it. We just make it work.
Well, look, I was an Oiler fan. I think you know that. I was old school Oiler all the way through and through. And, you know, because of that, the Astrodome and all that it represented, its sort of kitschy beauty and all that. But it really has been, you know, a whole lifetime of doing this. I can't imagine being an Astros fan, how nice it would feel. Look, even as an Oriole guy, and I can beat on Angelos, and I'll continue to do that this offseason as they're, you know, maybe drifting further and further away from said parade than where the Astros are at this point. But we had a parade here. We won in '83. For those folks in Houston and folks, you know, in their 70s and 80s that have been a whole lifetime living there, supporting that team, remember the Astrodome getting built back in the 60s. It must be a really nice feeling for them, more so than the Cubs or whatever. You know, the Astros were kind of given up for dead, kind of sort of moved leagues, for crying out loud.
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, it's been kind of emotional thinking about all the people that you've known over the course of your life that were huge Astros fans who didn't experience it. I mean, people putting, like, Astros T-shirts on gravestones or bringing pictures of their loved ones who have died to the parade. I mean, people get really emotional about sports because it's one of those things that people bond over and talk about. And I mean, it's great. Like, I think because it was so difficult makes it even more sweet. But it was, I mean, I have not been sleeping very well the last couple of weeks just because of all these games. The night of the Game 5 game, I don't think I got home until about 2:15 and asleep until 3:15. So,
well, at least they gave you the day off. I mean, you had an off day before Game 6, so you got a chance to sleep, catch up a little bit, right?
Work. It was a work week.
She is Steph Stradley. You can find her out on Twitter at Steph Stradley, as well as at the Houston Chronicle. She actually writes about football, but talks about baseball, and is a lawyer as well, which leads me to the next thing. I mean, obviously, all the incredible mojo going on with the Astros, and then this kid turns a leg in practice, non-contact, and you know, of all the stars you have there, whether it's Altuve and Correa and all the neat stuff going on, and Harden sitting behind home plate with the beard and all that, your boy Deshaun Watson, I don't think, you know, the way he took over in those 6-7 weeks of playing like a Pro Bowl quarterback, like a godsend to the franchise of the Texans, you know, it was a very, very bittersweet sort of weird couple of days in Houston last week, right?
Oh, yeah, because you're celebrating so great, and then you find out on Thursday that this has happened. And, you know, Deshaun Watson has done some things that are not just historic for rookies, but are just historic in general. And, you know, it's been a long time since anybody in Houston has had anything happy to be feeling about with the quarterback position. And so I think Tony Romo put it the best, and, you know, because, you know, there was all this Tony Romo talk in the offseason, like, is Tony Romo coming to Houston? And he was saying that the thing that makes Watson so remarkable is that he was not coming to an ideal situation. He did not have the ideal pieces around him. Specifically, Romo mentions the offensive line, and when he's talking about how remarkable what Watson did was, he's also probably implying that he saw exactly what Houston's situation was, and that's one of the reasons why he's not a Houston Texan. I mean, it was not an ideal situation for bringing in a rookie. You know, that the defense was pretty good, but then, you know, a number of the key players got hurt, and he didn't even miss a beat.
Well, I think the other thing was there was expectation put on the defense that the team should be able to win and win at that level in a depleted division as well. So there was a lot of expectation on him, probably in the way there wasn't Dak Prescott last year, or maybe Ben Roethlisberger going back, or even Joe Flacco in his rookie year who took the team to the AFC Championship game.
There was zero expectation because the whole summer it was Tom Savage is our starter and Watson's, you know, we're going to learn him up. And there's all sorts of discussion about, like, what was the timeline for how they were going to decide to bring him in. I mean, it was almost kind of like an accident that, you know, the Texans got beaten by the Jacksonville Jaguars at home the first week of the season, and that's when they did the switch. Now, what we didn't know then was the Jacksonville Jaguars would have the number one ranked defense in the league, right? And if that hadn't happened in that circumstance, does Watson end up showing up in that second half? And I think part of the deal that made Watson so hard to evaluate is the things that he does that are magical and the best are things that are hard to see in a practice where the quarterbacks have red shirts on, they're not allowed to be hit. That's all about evaluating what happens when your play goes perfectly and you're doing things, like the way that the play is designed. But, real football isn't perfect. It's messy. And then the players that do the best are the ones that can make bad situations good. It's just like golfers. A great golfer isn't about what great shots he hits. It's about getting into trouble and then how does he get out of trouble, how he saves a hole. And that's what Watson does the best, and probably the reason why it was difficult to evaluate that over the course of the summer, although you saw it some in the preseason, and you certainly saw it on his ability to make defenses uncomfortable, particularly in the red zone.
She is Steph Stradley. You can find her at the Houston Chronicle as well as at Steph Stradley. That's Stradley. And on Twitter as well as at StradleyLaw.com. We're going to get to the lawyerly pursuits in Colin Kaepernick, but I got to tell you about our friends at Box Hill Pizzeria. The best crab cakes in Arthur County can now be shipped anywhere. It's BoxHillPizzeria.com, but don't let them fool you. It's a crab cakeria. We all know that. And the crab cakes even go down to Houston, Texas, where they have some crabs down there as well. They just don't eat them the way we do around here. Box Hill Pizzeria. Don't forget the salad dressing. Tell Tommy and Chris we said hello as well. 26 years now I've been on the air here. In 26 years, D&L Window Tinting has been tinting everything. Cars, boats, businesses. They put the shades on the sun. They take away the squint. Parkville and White Marsh, D&L Window Tinting. Make sure you say hello to Jason. I'll be seeing him at the football game in a couple of weeks. We're into bye week here. Steph Stradley is our guest from Houston, where they had a little baseball parade last week, and then they had a football injury that's going to take away some of their mojo. We do play the Texans in a couple of weeks here, and I'll be touring around to a whole bunch of Houston people. But you are an attorney. I think the last time you and I got together was back in September on the backside of the Wembley and the knee, and I wanted to reach to you on that. You're now in a market there where you need a quarterback. It's November. Colin Kaepernick is no longer in the league. The collusion and the blackballing and all of that stuff. I know every single day we see things on Twitter and things out in politics that we've never seen before. Certainly in the case of this Kaepernick v. NFL and this dispute, the Texans would be a team that could take on Colin Kaepernick right now, but that ain't happening with Bob McNair. That's pretty clear. And the Texans have been, as much as any team, in the swirl here with the comments of McNair that came out of the negotiations with the Players Association a few weeks ago.
Well, I mean, I don't think it was a negotiation with the Players Association. I think that it's really difficult in our times where people talk past each other to have real conversations about these things. People feel what they feel, and a lot of it is they have a viewpoint, and then they kind of fill in the information that supports their viewpoint. Not everybody does it, but if you talk to people as just individuals as opposed to, cable news, embrace debate kind of discussions. I mean, basically that meeting that originally happened between players and the NFL was an attempt to say, hey, we're listening to you. What approaches can we take to help criminal justice in the future? That's a smart point of view. Then afterwards, there was a owners-only meeting that had some additional people at that meeting, additional owners at that meeting, right? And there was the analogy that was made as it relates to, we can't have the inmates run the prison. And that was put in an ESPN article in the context of a larger point of view, which was, at least as some describing, we don't have a transcript of what was being discussed at that moment, of a larger discussion of, hey, why is it that NFL headquarters is telling us what we're supposed to do? Why aren't we having more input as it relates to our league strategy? Just generally, right? But that particular comment got blown up because obviously in the context of criminal justice, and he actually apologize to the person who took issue at it at that meeting. But that was not a players' meeting, that particular one. And then McNair tried to make peace with the players that objected to it, including Dwayne Brown, who was in an extended holdout with the Texans, and people weren't having it just because of the context of almost our times, there's a lack of trust, and there's been a lack of trust between owners and players for a very long time. The political climate is such where our president is opining on how the NFL does its business. And so that makes this not just a criminal justice protest, but makes it an even bigger issue of, kind of the culture wars of us versus them kind of idea. So it's just a huge issue where everybody has their own life experiences that they bring to the table that informs how they see this particular controversy.
Well, then there's the whole part of whether there is collusion or blackballing, and it's pretty clear. I mean, dude doesn't have a job, and as I sit on the outside and see this, and I'll let the legal side of it play out, it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem like that's what the NFL would want to stand for, or what we would want to stand for in America. But all that being said, he's blackballed. He doesn't have a job right now.
Well, I mean, is it blackballing per se, like a legal blackball? I mean, because really, if you look over the history of the league, when we're talking about that there aren't guaranteed contracts for a lot of players, and there's a lot of control of ownership over what players do and don't do. And the number one rule with quarterbacks is they want their quarterbacks to, play on the field and don't be hurt, basically, and there have been long situations where, quarterback is a different position, the closest I can think, and it's certainly not the same circumstance, but people's feelings are the same, people's emotions are the same, was with Mike Vick. He struggled to find another job. Now, that was a completely different situation, but the emotions involved with this are so strong that on an individual team basis, you wouldn't even need to collude. Any team that is thinking of getting Colin Kaepernick needs to figure out how do you bring him onto the team without alienating a segment of your fan base. And that's not an easy thing to do because it's hard enough winning football games without worrying what's going to happen with your fan base when you bring in a controversial figure. I mean, but
he would be a better quarterback this week than Tom Savage. You would admit that, or you won't admit that?
I mean, it's not a question of admit. He hasn't even gotten to the point where he gets a tryout with teams. Now, the circumstances behind that, I don't know. Bill O'Brien has spoken about Colin Kaepernick a couple of times. One of these times was before the draft, and he said he's a good quarterback. We evaluate all the quarterbacks. And, of course, there's pluses and minuses with every option. He once again did this after Tom Savage's recent horrible performance against the terrible Indianapolis Colts, and he was asked specifically about Colin Kaepernick. Now, what's interesting about this is he could have just said, hey, we evaluate everyone who's out there, da-da-da-da-da, and he just basically said, yeah, he's a good quarterback, we're always looking at blah, 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 and said, well, you hadn't played in a while, and then that's kind of as an aside. Of course, T.J. Yates hadn't played in a while.
Neither at Case Keenum when he beat us coming out of a tree a couple of years ago.
Or Matt McGloin, so. But I do think that he is a very polarizing person. I can tell you, as someone who was wandering around the tailgates before the Indianapolis Colts game, he was a topic of conversation, and I had people yelling at me like it's something that I control. It's like, I'm just telling you what basic facts are. These are basic facts. This is what, O'Brien said. Now, why are you yelling at me? I didn't do anything. But that's, the NFL and each individual team is caught in between three basic groups. One group is like very anti-Colin Kaepernick. The other group is very for Colin Kaepernick. And then there's that group in the middle that says, can he win football games? Or kind of an offshoot of that group is, is he worth all the trouble to bring him in this far into the season? Like, do we want all this kind of divisive talk? Because he is somebody who's divisive. Now, as it relates to the legal case, that's a whole different story, because if you get to the point where you start doing discovery, you can find all sorts of things among people, writings and emails and texts.
Well, that's where this is going, right? That McNair and Kraft and Goodell, all these guys are going to have to turn their phones over, right?
Well, the phones over may not be as big an issue with some of the owners, because I'm not sure how conversantly texting these people are.
Right.
But if you go through enough documents, you can always find something that looks bad, or sometimes you find things that are bad. Also, when you're doing discovery, you're not just limited to that issue. You can also find out about ancillary issues. So it may be that the information that they're gathering from this is something that they're able to use, let's say, when they're renegotiating the next collective, or when they're getting the next collective bargaining agreement, which is going to be right around the corner. And on just like the basic discipline issues, because there is such a lack of trust between ownership and players right now, and it's gotten worse over the years and not better. This is the worst relationship that I have ever seen between the players and the owners since we're talking the replacement days, where they put replacement players on the field. But, they're gearing up as though they're going to battle, and they might have to.
Well, certainly we'll be following that. You'll be following that down there in Houston. We'll get a little football here in a couple weeks as the Texans and the Ravens will play. We get a little Tom Savage, and for that we are grateful. Always great to check in with you. Watch out for that Super Bowl and World Series hangover. It's hard to win 2 in a row. It's fun I remember 2 years ago talking to Kansas City. Last year the Cubs were going to win 10 in a row, right? Nobody's talking like that in Houston, but certainly a lot of young talent down there, and it might not be the last parade, but they're tough to win.
Hey, you just want the opportunity. You just want to be in the game, because for so many years that wasn't even, you'd have to be smoking something to think that they'd even be in the conversation. So just being in the conversation, being in the game, that's you just want a little juice.
There you go. Well, you got it going on. We'll check in again later on in the year. It's always fun to visit with you, Steph. Thanks for coming on with us.
Anytime.
She's the best. She is Steph Stradley. She writes about the NFL Texans at the Houston Chronicle online and blogs there, as well as at StradleyLaw.com. You can find her at Steph Stradley on Twitter, deep in the heart of Texas in Houston, where all they do is have World Series parades. We got Orioles stuff. We're going to be talking about the Orioles offseason and the mess that it is. We got a bye week here before we head to Green Bay next weekend. Luke's running around. I'm running around. Caps, Terps, we got basketball happening, all sorts of conversation around here this week. You can find all of it in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox free of charge each and every morning at 7 a.m. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to be judgment-free. They got the lunk alarm. They're going to get you in the best shape, even if you're doing the eggnog and pumpkin thing, as I've been known to do. It's $10 a month. It's everywhere. It's planetoftriumphs.com is a great way to get some inspiration, but it is Planet Fitness, of course. If there's any breaking news here in the next couple of weeks, any major shifts before the Ravens' next game in Green Bay, you're going to get all that first on the WNST Tech Service, as we did the Wellington Castillo departure on Monday. All that brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Kolatzis will be here on Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5. That is the SSV on WNST, all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and of course we stream our video live on Facebook Live, as well as on our YouTube WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.